alert, North Korea is a problem, defiant as ever, pressing against the toughest imposed sanctions in years, with an official government statement that it will never negotiate its nuclear weapons program. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith from the Fox Business Network. EMAC is in the house. Elizabeth McDonald, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov. And today's #OneLuckyGuy, the former congressman of the great state of Utah. And Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz is in the house.
Sounds like you're an announcer for the Blackhawks.
That's your Twitter handle, Jason in the house.
Jason in the house. That's
I
right.
love it.
That's right.
Yeah, good to have you.
Last time you said I had the new car smell.
You do.
That's obviously worn out.
You're a new contributor with Fox
News, right? No, it's got a few French fries in it now. I understand.
Right.
The new car smell's gone away.
We're working in that quarter pounder now, but it's good to have
that.
you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Glad to be here.
All right, let's get to it. Here is the news. In the wake of tough new UN sanctions, North Korea is rejecting the idea of talks, saying its nuclear weapons program is non-negotiable. That country's foreign minister said, quote, "We have already explained that unless the U.S.'s villainous policies and nuclear threats are solved and settled, our nuclear arms and ICBM will never be up for negotiation, and we will never give way in the path of nuclear development we have selected," end quote. And former U.S. ambassador to the UN and sometimes a guest on the show, John Bolton, warned the North's potential to strike American soil is no longer a fantasy.
I don't think there's any dispute from anybody who seriously understands North Korea's capabilities. And the general view is by next year, North Korea could have the capability of hitting any target it wanted to in the United States.
And the ambassador went on to say he believes the new sanctions, like the ones imposed by previous administrations, will do little to curb North Korea's nuclear appetite. But President Trump is praising the action recently taken by the United Nations, tweeting, quote, "After many years of failure, countries are coming together to finally address the dangers posed by North Korea. We must be tough and decisive," end quote. So here we are again on the precipice of North Korea going rogue, as we say. Is this different, worse?
Well, it is worse because their capability is growing. The frequency in which they're sending these missiles, towards Japan, is really problematic. As U.S. public policy, I do think it is right, and the president is right, to assume that what North Korea is saying is what they will actually do. And when you hear and read these stories about how they're escalating, again, the frequency, their capability, the long-range nature. Look, we deployed a THAAD system into South Korea. We're very unified with Japan and South Korea. We have built up things in Guam, but having been in the region, I was there. We went right up to the border this past spring. It is very serious. It is very tense. A lot of credit to the Trump administration for a 15-0 Security Council vote. Nikki Haley did a fabulous job in getting that through.
You had China and Russia come on board with that.
Look, they play as pivotal a role as anybody. China and Russia do not want to see our military presence there grow. But I think they understand with Donald Trump as the president that he will take action and he will push the envelope and make sure that the majority of our naval forces right now are in the Pacific. And that ought to be a pretty key indicator of what we're doing.
That should definitely trigger something. So, EMAC, what about the idea, and you heard the congressman saying it there, that the Trump administration is to be credited with some of where we are, its brand of diplomacy, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Baker was saying before on Fox Business that if you got a 15-0 vote under President Obama, Obama would have gotten another Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, to get Russia and China on board with it is really striking. I mean, basically, she is salivating, I'm sure.
Like maybe they'll get another one
But
day.
President Trump inherited a mess, right? It was kick the can down the road by other presidents with his policies toward North Korea, and now there's not much road left. So is the issue, how do you get China to step up? China doesn't like that anti-missile system. And do you get China to knuckle under and say, you know what, we're going to put more anti-missile defenses in there, and that's the way to get China on board?
UN vote, you're saying, and
yes.
More than just the statement that came out criticizing North Korea and telling them to step back. You're saying China's got to do even
yes, and
take it off.
Yes, and wow, to knock off a third of North Korea's exports, $1 billion worth, is a big deal. Next step would be to go after oil imports into North Korea.
Interesting. Jessica?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said here. I think, Trump administration, but more specifically Nikki Haley, are the real rock stars of this. It was amazing what she's done there.
How has she been a game changer?
She's been a game changer, I think, because she's been allowed to act as kind of a solo actor within the UN. I mean, she's gone after things that have been priorities for her. I think that she's made it clear to President Trump and to other members of the administration that that is her domain and that she has clear priorities. I think she has a very a good sense of what American values are, what our priorities are, and how to execute them. And I think that she's well respected, not only here, but internationally. And I think part of that does have to do with the fact that she wasn't at first a fan of President Trump, and that she came around, and that everyone knows that she's doing this for the good of the country. So all the props in the world to her. I wanted to add as well that I think it's important that public opinion is swaying on the North Korea issue. There's much more increased support for intervention there if North Korea does kick off and actually make some sort of attack. I don't know what that is due to, but I think that it is important, and that it certainly puts some wind at President Trump's back there in terms of support for moving on.
Well, part of it, too, is because he's brought it into the fold. We have a look at national security and the approval rating now for the president. And, you know, it's interesting because it's 48% approve, 47 disapprove. You have to dig in deeper to see which parties people were in. But that's high above his approval rating overall. So they like him. They like him on this issue.
So from what I'm hearing from you, Congressman, you're saying you approve of the administration's actions, you give them credit for what they're doing, but this doesn't go far enough. So if they were to go farther to curb North Korea's actions, what would you be suggesting as far as strategy?
Well, I think the United States is doing everything it can. I mean, everything from Dennis Rodman to deploying anti-missile.
We didn't deploy Dennis Rodman.
Anybody could get it done. I'm sure Dennis Rodman would get it done. But listen, I do think the international community is viewing Donald Trump much more like Ronald Reagan. I do believe that he will take decisive action. He is not bashful in using military force in an appropriate and tempered way. That is in part because he has some senior people from General Kelly and General Mattis, and you have very senior people who have been doing this for decades. And when he took action in Syria, I think the world kind of sat up, because when they saw Barack Obama, they saw him draw a red line and then do nothing. And then
they saw him erase that red line.
They didn't do anything. And so nobody feared him, and our international partners didn't believe him. But having been and talked to the foreign minister in South Korea, I talked with the prime minister in Japan. They actually believe and like and appreciate Donald Trump. And that's
you wouldn't know that by reading the mainstream. President Obama, just to give him a little credit here, if you do look at the attitudes towards him internationally, they are incredibly positive. And you look at his relationships with other world leaders, specifically in Western Europe.
Everybody was on the march around the world, from Russia to North Korea.
I mean, listen, you know Vladimir Putin likes Donald Trump plenty.
Name 8 years. Name one foreign policy its success that President Obama had.
Well, the climate accords, which we've now pulled.
Climate accords.
What? No, I mean, we've taken out. President Obama oversaw the taking out of more terrorists than any other president. No.
No,
if he's watching,
I don't know how you quantify that.
Jessica, if the former president is watching and you started with climate change, he's going to so wish you moved on to item 2.
I actually don't know if that's true. Listen, the red line issue, I'm totally with you.
I don't know how you get a Paris treaty that knocks out China and India who are not in compliance with it, because they can voluntarily be in compliance by 2030 for China. Getting back to North Korea, the anti-missile system is huge to get China on board. China hates it. They see it as a spying apparatus. Remember in 94, Bill Clinton did it with the Patriot anti-missile when that was short-range Scud-like missiles. And, you know, did it get China to knuckle under and go hardcore on North Korea? Yes. Can China step up now and go hardcore on North Korea? Possibly. Will China cheat? Possibly. They don't want chaos at the border. That's what's happening. That's what they're afraid of.
So, Congressman, take this down to the dinner table conversations that are happening all over the country right now. How serious of a threat is this, as we have heard and seen many analysts lay out the fact that this could be a threat to most areas in the United States? How serious do you see this right now?
Well, I had a chance to visit with Admiral Harris, who's our 4-star admiral in charge of Pacific Command. And when I said to him, what keeps you up at night? Like, what do you worry about? And he said, without equivocation, it is North Korea. It is dealing with somebody who we have very difficult time getting human intelligence on, somebody who is constantly berating the United States, you know, and that happens around the world, but he's backing it up by throwing missiles into the ocean that are going towards Japan. We have tens of thousands of United States troops. You have tens of millions of people in close proximity, and you just don't know when that missile is going to be live and when they're going to send it a little bit further.
So do you sit down with Kim Jong-un?
Look, if it were me, I would sit down with just about anybody, but you have to have the biggest, baddest military on the face of the planet to take out the threat if it is real and it is happening.
Don't you think we do?
I do. And that's what gives me great comfort. Not only the senior leadership, but the men and women who are out there serving on those boats and the aircraft carriers. There's nothing like going out on the U.S. Ronald Reagan and seeing the ominous power that we have to take out the threat. And that's what I think China and Russia understand. We do have the capability, and I don't think Donald Trump will be bashful in protecting the world and the United States. I hope it never comes to that.
We all do.
But it might happen.
Right. You know what you can call me?
What?
You can call me Liz.
Oh.
The alias former Attorney General Loretta Lynch used for official emails, including those related to her meeting with Bill Clinton at the height of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's messages. Why did she feel the need for an alias, Elizabeth? Plus, the reaction to President Trump's own take on the news on his Facebook page, touting his accomplishments, a good way to get out the message, or could it be taken the wrong way? And after the TV version of us wraps up, we pop up online, foxnews.com/outnumbered. Click on the Overtime tab, or you can watch us on Facebook Live, our handle Outnumbered FNC. And of course, tweet anytime you want. Sandra's on her phone right now.
A new report revealing that Loretta Lynch used the alias Elizabeth Carlisle for official emails as Attorney General, including those related to her infamous tarmac meeting last summer with former President Bill Clinton. The emails, part of a cache of hundreds of documents obtained by Judicial Watch and the American Center for Law and Justice. The fake name can be spotted in the email sent a day after the tarmac sit-down, with the subject line, wait for it, talking points/statement. The email reading in part, quote, "We are holding on the statement now, given that there wasn't any follow-up in the press avail." While the use of email aliases was not uncommon for members of the Obama administration, watchdog groups say it could be a tricky way to dodge requests for official documents. All this as the same trove of emails shows some members of the media appearing reluctant to cover the Clinton-Lynch meeting. A Washington Post reporter telling a Justice Department official, quote, "I'm hoping I can put it to rest by answering just a few more questions." And this from a reporter from the New York Times saying he's, quote, "been pressed into service to write about the questions being raised." Cannot wait to hear what you have to say about this alias.
There's so much wrong with this. First of all, you have reporters that are just want to gloss right over this and just move on as if they're, doing something in collusion to say, hey, we don't want to cover anything here. You did have the former Attorney General, Eric Holder. He used Al Cinder was his, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's real name. He used that to try to cover up some things.
So you're not surprised?
Here's the problem. If you go back and play the tape, Trey Gowdy, under questioning when Loretta Lynch was under oath, testified that she used official email, that she did not use classified information in a private setting. So he has her on the record. And what they're going to have to compare is this pseudonym versus what her real email was, and to see what the requests are. Now, remember, there are duly issued subpoenas, there are congressional requests, and there's Freedom of Information Act requests. And the first time that they went for the Freedom of Information Act request, the Department of Justice came back and said there are no emails responsive to this request. Now, it's required by law to provide those.
That's got you all riled up.
That is where I think they really step over the line, is when the Department of Justice says there are no responsive emails, and then they come back and find hundreds of them. Have we seen this story play out before?
And
yes.
Harris is just in love with this alias. You just love the idea.
In my mind's eye, there's a real Elizabeth Carlisle somewhere sitting, eating her Cheerios, and spitting them out one at a time, saying, "Girl, I don't even use email." I mean, it is odd to me. I mean, I understand
spitting out her Cheerios.
Al Cinder, I understand. I mean, maybe that was kind of a joke, and he's a basketball fan. But it just seems so random, and it just speaks to the issue of subterfuge. It's like we didn't know about that tarmac meeting until it was about to happen with a former president. His wife is under investigation.
Yeah.
It just feels like it's not quite right. So all we need to do at this point is ask a bunch of great questions, get to the bottom of those emails that came out of nowhere, and are there any more?
Right.
And does Elizabeth Carlisle Does she know about it?
Right, does she know about it? You use an official email with an alias. So, the other thing, too, is if they were only talking, if Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch were only talking about the grandkids, why was it so heavily redacted by the FBI? Why were so many pages blacked out? And remember, at that time, according to the local TV reporter who broke the news, the FBI, according to him, was saying no cell phone photos, no pictures, no cameras, no even talking on your cell phones when they were on the tarmac covering that story. And so, I don't know where this goes. You're right about asking about Trey Gowdy's, discussion under oath with Loretta Lynch.
What about the responsibility of the media to cover this encounter on the tarmac as evidence that obviously it wasn't? Jessica?
Well, what you did see in the emails as well is that the editorial staffs and the senior people at these papers would not stand for it not being covered. They were saying that they were being pushed to do it when they didn't want to. So that's a good thing, that that the people on top there are saying that this is important. I don't know really any Democrats who have defended this meeting, think it was a good idea. Loretta Lynch has talked about that since and gone out and said, I really wish he hadn't gotten on my plane. Right? She didn't want to have that conversation. No, I'm not saying that she's not to blame here. I think she's suffered.
Well, it's not that they're not defending it, but they're also not pressing hard into it, Jessica. Never did.
At this point, and going back as well to the alias issue, that is still official DOJ email she was using. That wasn't a private account. It was stored completely legally. It was an alias, which I've heard many people say that it was just to cut down on the number of emails about it, and that people would just email her directly versus going into a general bank. But it is official. It wasn't a Hillary Clinton private server issue. But the tarmac meeting, it's not good. I mean, there's no way about that. We should ask more questions about it, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't only have our attention on Democrats, on a failed candidate, on Loretta Lynch who isn't there. It's a distraction.
Wow. So many emails on the topic you needed.
What was your alias? The Riddler?
Oh,
what was your alias?
Okay.
Did you have an alias?
We've got to leave it there. I have a lot for her. Just joking. President Trump and his campaign organization reportedly going on offense against special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Their plan and whether it's the right strategy. Plus, new hope for a bipartisan effort to keep making payments to insurance companies, whether that's the way to go, or if President Trump is right in calling them a bailout.
So the president and his campaign organization reportedly are going on offense against special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. An official involved in that effort is telling the Washington Times this is war, and that they are launching a multi-pronged public relations effort to spread distrust of the investigation. The president is taking his case to his base. Listen to what he told a crowd in West Virginia last week.
We didn't win because of Russia. We won because of you. Are there any Russians here tonight? Any Russians? They can't beat us at the voting booths. So they're trying to cheat you out of the future and the future that you want. They're trying to cheat you out of the leadership you want with a fake story that is demeaning to all of us, and most importantly, demeaning to our country and demeaning to our Constitution.
Well, members of his team are also speaking out against the Russia probe, including senior counselor Kellyanne Conway and press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
If you want to talk further about a relationship with Russia, look no further than the Clintons, as we've said time and time again. Bill Clinton was paid $500,000 to give a speech to a Russian bank and was personally thanked by Putin for it. Hillary Clinton allowed 1/5 of America's uranium to reserve to be sold to a Russian firm whose investors were Clinton Foundation donors, and the Clinton campaign chairman's brother lobbied against sanctions on Russia's largest bank and failed to report it. If you guys want to talk about having relations, which you seem obsessed with doing, look no further than there. If you want to talk about somebody who's actually been tough on Russia, look at President Trump.
All right, drop that mic. But you know what? The president never leaves it there because he tweets. Did you know? Here's what he tweeted at one point. Quote, "You are witnessing the single greatest witch hunt in American political history, led by some very bad and conflicted people." Congressman?
I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders is, doing a fabulous job, and she does make a valid point about the duplicity of the media. But I would not advocate going to, quote unquote, going to war with an investigator who has subpoena authority. I think if you convince people and literally show the openness and transparency, much the way Jared Kushner did, much the way Donald Trump Jr. did, and saying, look, I've got emails. I'm not going to use bleach bit or a hammer on my stuff. Here's exactly what happened.
But it took him a couple times to get on the record.
Well, but again, look at the conclusion of what they did. And I think that openness and transparency is what America wants to see. I don't think that there's been any evidence. I don't think there should be a special counsel, but again, I think that was a fundamental, huge mistake, but it is there.
Emac, do you think that there would be less of a fever about getting behind the president now and his team and pushing against if there were establishment Republicans who maybe would chime in every now and again as well?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it seems like there's this growing sort of, I don't want to call it an insurgency or mutiny, but there's this coterie of Republicans who seem, just tracking it, to be opposed to President Trump on a visceral, personal level. That's the question. But even though they ostensibly deny it, the president has said things that cause grudge matches to be sparked. The thing with Mr. Mueller is he can only be let go by the Attorney General due to Department of Justice rules. It's not like there's some congressional statute where Congress can step in and say, yeah, let's get rid of the special counsel. So to your point, we have Republicans stepping up to ring fence Robert Mueller with proposed legislation to protect his position.
Which I think was absolutely wrong. I think what Senator Tillis was trying to do, A, I think is unconstitutional, and B, I think is absolutely wrong. The president is the constitutionally elected officer who is in charge of the executive branch. The body that is instilled in the Constitution to provide oversight is the Congress. Congress needs to do its job, not impanel some 3 anonymous judges in something that Senator Tillis wanted to do. I think it was very ill-conceived.
Well, it's hard to disagree with the strategy to go on offense. This is war, right, Jessica? When this administration's been on defense and struggled with that, it's been a difficult position to be in.
It has, absolutely. But what they could do is focus on the agenda. I mean, the American people have made it clear over and over again that they're concerned about health care. They're concerned about the economy. They're concerned about foreign policy.
The administration's going to say, we'd love to, but all the media wants to focus on is this.
We'll talk about the new propaganda network, which is obviously what they're trying to do there, where they don't highlight anything but positive stories. Kayleigh McEnany's new gig.